Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is called The Fighter Pilot. This story is fiction, and resemblance to anyone, living or dead, is coincidental. Richard Donaldson woke up screaming and sitting bolt upright in bed as his wife Maud brought him a glass of water. Here, take this. It was the middle of the night and he was dripping with sweat as he thankfully gulped down the ice-cold drink. "It's that dream again, isn't it?" she inquired. Yes, he confessed. He had been having the same dream now for several months, and always he was the pilot of a Second World War aircraft, a Spitfire, shot up and limping home from a dogfight with a Messerschmitt 109 hot on his tail. He had been named after his great-grandfather, a fighter ace, having 26 kills to his credit. He had been brought down after a tremendous battle and was believed to have crashed off the English coast. Neither his body or his aircraft had ever been found. Richard finished his water and then slept through until daybreak. This time he awoke in a more normal fashion, but he disturbed his wife and told her his dream had resumed and that he had crashed the plane into a thickly wooded area. Also, he was convinced the dream had something to do with the death of his great-grandfather. He was not unduly superstitious and knew it sounded weird, but he had a feeling he was being deliberately haunted for some reason. Richard Donaldson was a plumber by trade, and in his middle years he was by nature a very practical person, and not given to flights of fancy. Still, Maud suggested he go along to his doctor for a health check, in case there was some underlying cause for his nightmares. Reluctantly he did so, and came away with a clean bill of health, but was advised to cut down on the overtime. He was not overweight and didn't drink or smoke excessively. The strange dreams were making him jumpy though, and he was scared to close his eyes. It was shortly after this latest dream that another strange thing happened. He and Maud were just completing a quiet game of Scrabble when Richard stood at the board and suddenly jumped up exclaiming, "Look at that, look at that!" Maud followed his eyes and said she didn't know what he was getting at. "There, it's there, as plain as the nose on your face." She was still no wiser, until he pointed to several words, and taking up pencil and notepaper, jotted down certain words from the board and linked them up. Box, well, oak, blasted forest, links. With a shaking hand he turned the words into an address. See what it reads? Blasted oak, Boxall Forest, links, could mean Lincolnshire. Don't you see? If it exists, it could be where the plane in my dream went down. Without more ado, he got out his road atlas and found the Lincolnshire page. After searching for a while, he exclaimed, "Ah, here it is. I was right. There really is a Boxall Forest. It looks like an old wood about 30 miles inland. I have to go there and try and locate a big, old ruined oak tree." Maud was not convinced, and thought that finding a dead oak in a wood was a daft idea, but knew he wouldn't rest until he had got this fantasy out of his system. She said she would accompany him on his venture. At the weekend, a 2-hour journey had them into deepest Lincolnshire, and it had what seemed like a fool's errand, for there was no sign of a wood, and the fields were like prairie deserts. And then they were turning more inland again, as they followed their map course, and there it was, the Boxall Forest, right in the middle of nowhere. Parking the car at the side of the road, Richard jumped out excitedly, but Maud was full of foreboding, as they walked from bright sunshine into a dark woodland canopy. As they had not bothered finding a recognised car park, they had no dedicated pathway to follow, and Richard said they ought to keep to the outer perimeter at first, and then work towards the centre once they had their bearings. The forest was a good mixture of dead and alive broadleaf trees, and appeared to have been neglected for many years. Luckily both Richard and Maud were regular walkers, and were wearing strong cotton-drill trousers and hiking boots, as the brambles and vegetation got thicker, clutching at their arms and legs and any bare flesh, as if trying to bar their path and saying, "You have to go back, you can't come here." As they reached the clearing, and the new light was dazzling, but still no sign of a big dead oak. Here the ground was boggy and seemed to slip away beneath their feet. Clearly nobody ever ventured into this part of the woodland acreage. They stopped to listen, and the silence was deafening, and Maud remarked there was no bird song. As they moved further in towards the centre, they stumbled into an area of petrified logs and peaty ground. This was scary, and Maud suddenly squealed, losing her footing. Richard had to stop and haul her out. Her boots sucked and squelched as they re-emerged, covered in sticky mud. They would have to turn back. This was getting much too dangerous. Richard straightened up again and uttered a sharp gasp of astonishment as he saw their prize. He knew instantly this was it. The blasted oak was dead ahead. It stood proud, like a tall grim monument from prehistoric times. It had its own space, as if no other tree dared enter its presence. Shafts of golden sunlight shone down onto it from above, but the ground looked treacherous, and the blunted shapes of petrified logs lay all around. Richard told Maud to stay put as he gingerly advanced into the swampy mire. With adrenaline racing through his veins, he lurched to one side and grabbed a rounded piece of wood for support. It came away in his hand, and he realised it had been shaped and sculpted. It was from the tail of an aircraft. He whooped and yelled to Maud that he'd found it, but he instructed her to stay away as he retreated back to her side, still clutching his carved piece of wood. They made their way back and drove to a police station where he gabbled out his find to a disbelieving desk sergeant. A week later, both Richard and Maud were present when a large team of specialist engineers with heavy lifting gear dug up the sad carcass of a supermarine Spitfire. The skeletal remains of the pilot were still inside the partly undamaged cockpit. Richard knew beyond doubt that it was the mortal remains of his great-grandfather. He also knew his terrible dreams would be gone forever. Now his ancestor could be laid to rest in hallowed ground. End.